Good morning, Tampa Bay. What is going on? Channelside in the morning, live on the Channelside Sports Network. I am Danny. That man over to the right of me, you know him, the old Bushman.
Good morning. Good morning. Happy Monday. Happy trade deadline eve, everybody.
And August 1st, dude.
I know.
Football.
Football's right around the corner.
And you know what's crazy is I always I hate being that guy that's like, it's already August, because I used to make fun of my grandmother for doing that all the time. Like, oh, the year's just flying by. And I'm like, damn it, the year's just flying by.
I think when you get older too, it's like, man, it's like already almost the end of the year. It's like, where's the time go? Where does it go?
Oh, good Lord. Welcome to the show. We might have a few less viewers than normal because we are not on Facebook anymore. We are exclusive to YouTube. We are rebroadcasting on Twitter as well.
Take that, Zuckerberg.
Yeah, you can't flag us for fake spam Bangladeshi doctor copywritten
fake that
infringement.
Yeah.
Okay.
Take that, Zuckerberg.
Dick.
Suck it.
Got a good show lined up here for you today. We're going to grade the David Peralta trade. And then we're gonna do some fantasy trading. Evan and I are gonna do some fantasy trading, which is gonna be a hell of a lot of fun. We'll try to be somewhat realistic with it, but also, I mean, we might just be, MLB the Show style trade deadlining.
Danny, do you know how excited I am about the next 48 hours?
How excited?
I'm excited. It's like that scene in basketball. You're excited. Feel these nipples. Even though I know, look, and the Rays they made one trade over the weekend. And we'll get to that in just a few minutes or so. But this is like crunch time to where you need to get a deal done by 6:00 tomorrow afternoon, and This is where you're gonna see really almost like the contenders and pretenders really kind of show, especially the teams that are in a playoff push right now. And I'm hoping the Rays will make a couple more moves. Now, obviously, we want them to make a blockbuster move here.
Right.
But is that necessary maybe now, since one of those players is really kind of off the table? It narrowed down to 3 teams for the Juan Soto sweepstakes, and the Rays are not one of them. The Yankees are not one of them either. So it's mostly the NL teams that are in the sweepstakes for him. But for when it comes to the Rays, it's like, okay, well, we made one move. What other things are we going to maybe pull the trigger on? And that's what I like to see. I've got Jeff Passan on his notifications are on, and John Heyman's and Bob Nightingale. I got all those guys' notifications on, so when something goes down, I'm ready to go. So it's fun. It's fun.
It is a lot of fun. I think the baseball trade deadline might be the only trade deadline where things actually do happen more frequently than the other sports. Because how many times NBA trade deadline comes up or NFL trade deadline, you're like, oh my God, who's gonna? This guy hates his team. He's gonna get moved.
Well, granted, the NFL trade deadline is exciting too, as well, because you see bonkers moves too, just like MLB. But MLB is, the trade deadline is really more impactful than the other two teams, because this is where the playoff teams are looking to get better and make that push, and that's why it's more exciting. And you see big name players get moved, and sometimes out of left field you see a big move and you're like, oh my God, he got traded to this team. Oh my God, maybe for a slapdick prospect or something like that. So yeah,
right,
fun stuff.
We're gonna talk all about what we would do if we were in the GM and ownership role of the Rays and try to make a big splash. Of course, we're going to go through our Tampa Bay Buccaneers offensive projections for Tom Brady and the wide receivers, as you guys
kudos to you, by the way. Those are some great graphics and made some great discussions on Twitter. Kudos to you, sir.
That. Thank you very much.
Tip your cap if you love to take it off and tip it real quick.
I just fixed it. I can't.
Well, then you don't just pantomime it. Just pantomime it. There you
go. Do a back tip.
Just do a back tip. Yes.
And then, of course, we are going to talk about who are the highest paid wide receivers in the NFL, and are all of them worth the money that they're making? Maybe, maybe not. And then, of course, unfortunately, we lost the late, great, legendary Bill Russell at the age of 88 over the weekend, and we're going to pay some respects to the legendary Bill Russell, who meant way more to the game
than LeBron. What? Sorry.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of like off the court, abso-freaking-lutely.
Yes.
You know, and a lot of people are going to talk about it, and you know, we'll dive into that towards the end of the show here and kind of end on that note. Thank you for those who are tuning in on the Twitter. Definitely appreciate it. You guys are hopping in here and at nauseum, and we love it. Evan and I are going to jump right into the David Peralta trade, and we're going to break it down and talk about the veteran outfielder that they made the trade for prospect that it's not going to be ready for a little bit of time anyway.
Yeah, almost got him for like a steal, to be honest with you. I was really surprised when the notification came that the Rays traded for David Peralta, because he was a name really they hadn't maybe whispered about. We hadn't really seen on social media about, hey, they can make a move for Peralta. It's a good move, a veteran outfielder that they're going to bring in. Obviously, we need the depth and another power bat per se in the outfield because of the injuries that we've had. Peralta is going to bring a lot to the clubhouse too, as being a veteran presence. I thought it was good. Like, look, I mean, obviously, you were hoping for like a bigger move where, hey, and then maybe they could go out for Juan Soto. Obviously, the asking price for Soto is so gargantuan and so big that, and we talked about this last week and the previous weeks is, are you really, really willing to give up that much to get obviously a superstar player of his caliber? And I don't think the Rays were ever in that mode of making an offer to Washington at all for Soto. So you got to look at some other avenues to really, make your team a little bit better. So yeah, I like this trade. I mean, you're pretty much giving up almost next to nothing to get Peralta over here.
Right. And like you said, he's going to give you that veteran leadership, and he's there. There's nothing, and this is, you and I have talked about this a lot when we were trying to dissect what the Rays need to do in terms of finishing the season on a higher note.
Mm-hmm.
And when they make these trades, this is not a huge splash trade.
Right.
Peralta's 35 years old. He's on the last year of his contract. I'm not a fan of the last year of the contract trades that the Rays seemingly always do. However, that's what they do. But he is consistent. Mm-hmm. And that's what they need more than anything right now, is they need that consistency at the plate. ESPN did a breakdown, and he is basically a mirror image of what Ohtani is doing at the plate. I'll take that.
I'll take that too, especially if you can get him for a bargain price. I mean, you got him for next to nothing when you're just giving away a catching prospect. And think about this too, Danny, that, you've got him there, and then you've got Manuel Margot coming back pretty soon.
Yep.
You've got Harold Ramirez coming back pretty soon. And then you've got Wander Franco coming back pretty soon. So you got 3 big power bats coming back at the right time. And then you add Peralta to the mix. So your lineup is getting beefier and getting a little bit scarier when you got those 3 guys coming back and you've got Peralta already there.
Yeah, and that's what you want. You want to be in that situation, especially when you're coming deeper into the season.
Exactly.
When you're trying to push for the playoffs. They're what, a game and a half ahead of the Guardians. The Guardians were able to close that gap a little bit. We said on Friday, you have to win the series. Didn't win the series.
Look, I know I'm jumping ahead, and I looked at upcoming games just to go, upcoming schedule. Sure. August looks like a pretty manageable schedule coming up. And then I jumped ahead to September.
Did you die a little inside?
Not only did I die a little,
I
almost had a heart palpitation because I looked at the schedule. The schedule is one of the toughest I've seen in a very long time in September. So if they're going to be making any kind of more moves, now's the time to do it, because you're pretty much playing all of the AL East again, and you're also playing the Houston Astros and the Cleveland Guardians. So you're playing teams that are in the playoff picture. All the teams are playing in, and you're playing Toronto too. So you're playing. These are the teams you're playing in September.
It's scary.
Toronto, Boston, New York, Houston, and Cleveland.
Right. It's not where you
No.
that's not a situation you want to be in.
And Danny, the final week of the season, they're playing Houston. Yeah, it's not. No.
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 Well, then Shane McClanahan looked human over the weekend.
Yes, he did.
Which is not good.
Well, and a lot of people were putting on Twitter like, hey, maybe he, after the All-Star game, getting shelled the first inning, maybe have shooken him up. Let's be realistic here, people. Just because he got shelled in one smidgen of an inning in the All-Star break doesn't really break down a pitcher. Does it maybe break his confidence level?
I don't even know about that, man.
Yeah.
It's the All-Star game.
Is it a curse? Yes, I think it is. And remember I said this on the show is if you're going to put him in there, put him for one batter and take him out. But they put him in there longer than that. Yeah. It's always the curse of the All-Star game where superstar players after the break, see if they play the game, maybe in the home run derby or the game itself, they have some sort of decline. And that's hoping that, hey, maybe this is just an anomaly where Shane just got shelled didn't really look himself. So hopefully going forward, I mean, next start will be good. But yeah, wasn't a good one yesterday.
No, but I mean, he's human.
Yes.
Like the greatest pitchers of all time have bad games. Like, and that's the thing that's, this is the Rays fan base again going, oh my God, he's done. He's over the season. Now, one thing that I did find that was interesting is, what is his name? I think it's Tom Drew that works for Sports Illustrated that covers the Rays.
Oh yeah. I forget his name. Mm-hmm.
Something like that. I think his last name is Drew. First name is regardless of the fact is he put an article out about the amount of innings that Shane McClanahan has pitched in his career. And he is already over. He's already over. He's pitched more innings in his career already this season than he has any other season before. Which is
it's kind of surprising because Rays pitchers aren't normally, especially starting pitchers, aren't normally doing that because of their pitch counts and the innings that they have limited.
Right. So obviously, if you're a pitcher, you want to pitch as much as humanly possible. Right. There is.
Yeah, I don't know what that is.
Those are basketball players.
Okay. Well, we're not talking about basketball.
Any of them. We're going to talk about Bill Russell later.
Yes.
And I appreciate the comment. Comment's a comment. It pushes us. As long as you hit that thumbs up button, that's all that really damn matters to me.
Right. It's a good lineup of NBA players too.
You know what? Honestly, it is.
Here, I'll put up the comments so everybody can see.
And damn you for sidetracking us. Look, this is a situation that's going to be unique for the Rays going forward with Shane McClanahan. Mm-hmm. Because we know that Kevin Cash likes to monitor pitch counts very, very closely. And maybe it's not him. We said this before. Maybe it's coming from up top. Maybe Kevin Cash is watching the pitch counts from, he's being told, watch the pitch counts. Kevin Cash is being told, hey, pull your guy at this. But that's not happening with Shane McClanahan. And with all of the science, with everything that we know now going forward with, pitchers just pitching themselves into injuries, where's that going to leave Shane McClanahan if they make the postseason? Is he going to have anything left? Because he's going to be how many more games is McClanahan going to be pitching from August 1st until the playoffs?
Probably 4 or 5, maybe more
over the next 2 months?
Maybe 10.
Right. So that's where you go, oh shit. Okay.
Well, here's my thinking on it too. If they've got the spot locked in for the wild card, they will probably limit, if not maybe have him go out for maybe a start or two. Because if they have it locked down, like save him for the playoffs instead of having him go out. Like if you're playing a meaningless game, you don't want him out there.
I don't know if they're going to have any meaningless games though.
Well, that's the problem too. Is coming down the stretch, these next 2 months, all of these are going to be meaningful games, not meaningless games, because they don't have it locked in yet. There's no locked in spot yet for them. So for him and his starts, you're going to have to figure he's going to be making probably more than half I would say close to 100% of the rest of his starts if they don't lock in a spot and have a little bit of a bumper room between the other teams and the spots. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And also, guys, to ask the big question is, okay, if they lock in a spot, they're in the playoffs, and he's really kind of going over the innings and the pitch counts that they're normally used to limiting these guys. Is when he starts in the playoffs, are you going to let him go?
Right.
You know what I mean? Because you could harken back to the whole Blake Snell thing is, are you going to yank him after 5 innings or 6 innings if he's rolling or not?
Right. And that's where you're like, it's hard.
Yeah.
Because the drop off from Shane McClanahan to Corey Kluber,
who pitched well over the weekend. He had 10 Ks against his former team.
Pitched well over the weekend. But I mean, that's still a significant drop off at this stage in Kluber's career.
True.
And that's where it makes you nervous. And you go, okay, so we've got like one ace, like one solid ace on this team. And I don't know.
Well, that's why I think coming up in the trade deadline, and that's what we're talking about right now is, hopefully they'll make a push for another, starting pitcher-esque person to fill in the rotation, because I think with this rotation, it's they're above average, but they're not excellent. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like they're getting the jobs done, but they're also inconsistent too when it comes to, being great. Like Kluber's been up and down all season long. Let's not, take
call a spade a spade.
Yeah, let's call a spade. Yeah, he's been inconsistent. I mean, the Saturday start was fantastic, and that's something you hadn't seen from him in a long time. Or maybe it's because he was playing his former team, where he wanted to show out. But when it comes down to it, he's just been. It's that roller coaster we talk about. It's been inconsistent, especially with this whole team all year. So I would say, with the other moves that they're hopefully going to make, is you bring in another pitcher as well.
Absolutely. Before we bump ahead, I want to ask you, what is your grade?
I give it a B+.
That's exactly where I'm at.
I give it a B+.
Because you need the consistency.
Right.
I don't care who the player is. I don't care. I don't care who you traded for. If you give up a prospect, great, because we've talked about this ad nauseum. Our prospects aren't always panning out for us, but we've got great prospects, right? So move them.
Right. I know we're gonna go into fantasy GM right now, but the D-Rays Bay on Twitter posted this up this morning. Kind of a out of left field, no pun intended, trade. How do I say this? A trade that they want to happen. That maybe I don't know.
I like it.
I don't know if it would happen. It's an intriguing thing that they proposed, and I'll pull it up on the screen right now if you can see it. It is the time has come for the Rays to trade for Blake Snell. How's that?
I like it.
Would it happen? Probably not. Because it's a funny scenario that you would want to go trade for a pitcher you traded away.
But
they did that with Chris Archer. But this is Snell. I mean, you could probably get him for next to nothing because he's been inconsistent too. So would you want to trade for an inconsistent pitcher? He had a good start over the weekend. I mean, you would probably have to give up a few, maybe double, AAA prospects for him.
But don't you think that let's say hypothetically they made it. Let's say hypothetically they made a trade for Blake Snell. Wouldn't he have more fire under him getting traded back to the Rays to be like, hey, I'm the guy you traded away. Don't do that again.
I think the fire would be different because maybe he would be. I don't know, man. I don't like Blake Snell. That's the thing. I hate him. I don't hate him. I'm sorry. Hate's such a strong word. I don't like him. His personality sucks.
I agree.
But he's been so inconsistent this season with the Padres. Maybe you get him back with Kyle Snyder, and maybe Snyder does a thing or two with his arm because he's been so inconsistent. He's been like that trade with the Padres hasn't really worked out for both teams because he hasn't looked good, and all the prospects we got have all been injured. I mean, Francisco Mejia has been relatively good. I mean, he's really been filling in nicely for Mike Zunino, but he's on the IL too. So all those guys that you got back have all been have IL stints. So it's like, okay,
Right.
well, this trade has almost been a wash right now. You know what I mean? For both
Yeah.
teams. Hey,
Unfortunately,
if they could pull out something like that and bring Snell back, that would be funny. And it would be, hey, bring him back. Why not? I'm open to it.
you have to bolster up your rotation at this point.
But is San Diego willing to make that trade, because they're heavy in it too? I mean, they're only a couple of games behind the Dodgers right now. Would they do
Right.
that? Probably not, because you'd have to give them like a frontline starter, like a guy ready to go.
Right. They're a game and a half up of the Phillies in the second wild card spot too. So
Right.
it's not something that you want to go, yeah, well, let's just give up let's give up one of our starting pitchers and say,
Right.
yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So it is a difficult situation. I don't know if that'll happen. It's definitely, but here's the thing is like, this is the day where you make that kind of stuff, a conversation piece at least.
Mm-hmm.
And kudos to D-Rays Bay for doing that, because it's stuff like that that makes the trade deadline fun, and that's what makes it fun for me as well. Like, could we do that?
Did you when I sent you that picture of that proposed trade, what were your thoughts on
that? My thoughts were not family friendly. But not in a bad way.
Okay.
In like okay. Like that's not something that would have come to mind, especially knowing that they just signed him to a large deal.
So if you don't know what you're talking about, a caller that called into the mothership per se at 620 WDAE over the weekend proposed a trade that the Rays would give up Wander Franco and Tyler Glasnow for Juan Soto. And here's the thing. The funny thing was, and I looked at both sides of this. I looked at Facebook groups and I looked at Twitter. Like, it was like split half and half. And even people calling in were like split half and half. So almost like it could be a doable trade. And I looked at it a few times. And I looked at it and I evaluated it. It's not a bad deal. Because, right. And hear me out now. I think they signed Wander Franco too early for that extension. They locked him up way too early. Okay. He's already been on the IL, 3 times this season?
Right.
Okay. That's my first red flag with Wander Franco.
That was exactly what I was looking up, by the way. I was like, I know he's been on the injury list a hell of a lot.
3 times. And this is the first year of his 10-year extension contract. And then you have Tyler Glasnow, who has, he's almost he threw over the weekend at the Trop. He's looking like he's almost back to full arm strength. Okay. And you don't really know if you're going to get him back. If you do get him back, that would be fantastic. Because then you now have McClanahan and you have Glasnow in your rotation. But if you look at this from the outside in, if you have Glasnow, who coming off of Tommy John surgery, so you don't know if he could be a Steven Strasburg or it could be, back to Tyler Glasnow-esque, per se, coming back from that. And then you have Wander Franco, who you have a 10-year locked-in contract with him where, he's already been injured 3 times. And obviously he's probably like a one, a generational talent too for the Rays too as well. But you have Juan Soto on the other hand. He's 23. He's been super healthy. I don't think he's ever been on the IL before.
To my knowledge, he has not been.
23 years old, prime. He's still, he's a young player and he's locked in for team control for the next 2 years. You make this trade, you're kind of giving. And I say this, look, I'll probably get roasted on social media for this. You're kind of giving two unknown. You're giving 2 unknowns to Washington, who Washington is really in rebuilding mode. So if you give 2 unknowns to Washington, where, hey, look, if they pan out, they pan out. Good for them. It was a good trade. But you're also getting Juan Soto, the Rays are, which you can kind of do the same deal with Soto as you did with Wander Franco. It could make sense, but it's not obviously not going to happen. But it's so, I'm going to defend this. I'm going to defend this anyways. If this trade would have happened, I wouldn't be mad at it.
Right.
I wouldn't be mad at it because it tells me the Rays are willing to give up prized possessions for another prized possession. You know what I mean?
Right. And it's the way that I look at it is you can currently right or wrong. If you have any doubts about Wander Franco, because I don't think that there's I don't believe that there is a front office personnel that is not a fan of Wander Franco on any
Right.
team.
And listen, everybody, I'm not saying that the Rays should trade Wander Franco. I'm just saying, like, as a scenario, why not? Why not?
Right.
I'm just saying. There's two unknowns here, and I'm just also saying, why not? You're almost trading a pre-superstar for an already superstar, because you already know what you're getting with Juan Soto, and I think Washington kind of already knows what they may be getting with Wander Franco.
Right.
Because we haven't really seen the full potential of Wander Franco yet.
This is true. And that's why, that's why that proposal for me is, I like that proposal, because a lot of times when we're talking about making a trade, you're not going to throw out the supposed future franchise player on your team. Like,
Right.
You're not just going to throw that name out willingly. So that's what makes that whole thing, is it fantasy? 100% fantasy.
100%, yes.
But it's a fun scenario to think about, because it's not something that you're accustomed to, especially, I mean, hell, in any sport. How many times do you think that Aaron Rodgers' name will be on any trade deadline talks this season? No. Right? Just signed that huge ass deal. He's not going anywhere. But Wander Franco just signs that huge deal, and then now all of a sudden we're talking about, hey, we could possibly trade away Wander Franco. And you go, oh, well, damn. Okay. Like, I didn't even think of that. So that to me is, I like that mentality of, and not even, and on it, I don't see, I wouldn't trade Wander Franco for anybody else outside of packaging him for Juan Soto.
Now, here's another scenario that I put in. Instead of taking him out, instead of trading him away, maybe throw in a Randy Arozarena and Tyler Glasnow for Juan Soto, because Arozarena will be coming up for free agency, I think, this next offseason.
Right.
So
is that enough though?
I think it would be. And maybe throw in another prospect. So do a Arozarena, Glasnow, and then a prospect. Maybe Brujan or maybe Walls, and then you get your Juan Soto. That to me would be enough.
I could go for that. Yeah. I don't think that Glasnow and Arozarena alone is enough. If I'm Washington, I'm like, you're on the right track.
I need more. Yeah.
But yeah,
I got you. I think if you do those two and then another like one of the top prospects that we have, like a Brujan or a Walls, then you would make that trade. Because I think the Arozarena trade would be somewhat more reasonable, more logical for the Rays anyways, because you've got a guy who's coming up on free agency, unlike Franco, who's locked in.
Right. Yeah. We only trade for guys coming into free agency.
I know.
We don't trade guys that are going into free agency. We only receive them.
I know. That's a good point. But still.
Why do we do that?
I have no idea. That's a good point.
Like, when I saw the announcement that we traded for David Peralta, I didn't know anything about his contract situation, but I immediately assumed, oh, this is the final year of his deal.
Well, I think they do these moves because ultimately these guys are rentals anyways. And, with Peralta at the end of the year, I mean, you could maybe try and re-sign him for cheap, because he is he's mid-30s, and the market for him is probably going to be somewhat
a little bleak.
A little low for him in the offseason. So let's just say, hey, we get him in the final year of his contract. He does pretty well. We like Peralta. We like the way he's meshed well with the guys. Maybe we can offer him like a team-friendly deal to bring him back for like a 1-year spot. I think that's why the Rays always go after these kind of like, hey, these guys are going in the free agency, because they can look at it as, well, we don't have to like cover the rest of their contract, because we can just cut them loose in the offseason, because, they're going to probably test free agency. You know what I mean?
Right.
So it's like it's a very low risk move that they can do, especially since they got Peralta on the cheap. It's like, hey, it's a low risk move for us, because if he does well, it's a huge gain for us. And then at the offseason, we could maybe negotiate with him or not, or if we do well in the playoffs, we can just cut them loose.
Tony, our one of our co-hosts of TV4 is blowing us up on the Twitter chat.
Is he?
He said, "Would you rather spend $500 million on Soto or a new stadium?"
Well, you're not gonna. Nobody's gonna be spending $500 million on him.
No,
make any sense.
I'm going to be spending $500 million on it because I live in Hillsborough County.
Right. That's a. Give me Soto. Why not?
I mean, because here's the thing: is a superstar player is going to put asses in seats,
right?
In any sport, in any situation, people are going to come and watch a superstar.
Yeah. Yeah, I would give you Soto. I mean, we've got a few years left in the lease. Why not? At this point, why not? Give me Soto. Because you know why? I'm tired of talking about the stadium. I'd rather just have a superstar.
I'd rather talk about Soto. Are you tired of talking about Soto yet?
Yeah, I'd rather talk about Soto. Give me Soto. You know what? To me, a trade for Soto is more realistic than having a new stadium, anyways.
Right. Well, and another thing that he just proposed on in the Twitter chat as well is it'll probably be a Rosarina, a prospect, and McClanahan as the ask.
Nah, it's not going to happen. McClanahan's not going to get moved.
But he's saying like that would be the ask. If I'm Washington, I'm saying no, I want your ace because you're basically taking our guy.
Oh, Danny, we've got some breaking news right now. I don't want to cut into it. From Adam Schefter, Deshaun Watson has been suspended 6 games and no fine.
Wow. I mean, he just settled another 3.
He settled all the rest. You think he settled the rest of them? They are all done.
That
happened this morning too. So I think that was in preparation for the. Obviously, they were talking about it last night. The preparation for the suspension was going to come down at 9 a.m. this morning. A little preemptive because it is 8:30. So yeah, it is confirmed. He is suspended 6 games by Adam Schefter. Well, should we put confirmed and Adam Schefter in the same sentence now? Because with Adam Schefter,
I mean, outside of that one gaffe, I think it's kind of okay.
Right. You know what? I was. This is the punishment I knew what was probably going to happen would be 6 games is nothing, and no fine.
That's.
I drafted him in a dynasty league over the summer for Scott Fishbowl, and I got Deshaun way late, and I'm glad that I did.
Here's the thing that I don't understand about how the NFL handles punishment. DeAndre Hopkins is out for 6 games for testing 0.001% higher on a banned substance.
Calvin Ridley is suspended a full year for gambling on a sport.
$1,200, I believe,
or 50. I think it was $1,500.
Like that. It was sub $2,000,
and he wasn't even betting on his own team.
Like, I don't know.
I'm sure everybody in Cleveland is kind of rejoicing right now because it's not a full season. So,
yeah. That's just, to me, that's absolutely bananas. That
this is going to be the biggest thing on social media and in sports is this punishment because he gets 6 games, no fine.
Right. Which is look, this is a very slippery slope to talk about, right? Because you're talking about sexual allegations, and you want to make sure that you are representing the people that are accusing Deshaun Watson of this appropriately.
Mm-hmm.
Right? You want to make sure that you are not just sweeping it under the rug.
So I was incorrect. He did settle 3 more lawsuits. But there's 1 left to go. So
Is that the main? I wonder if that's I would assume that's the main one.
I think it is. I think it is the main one. So he's got 1 left. So he settled the other 3. He's got 1 left. So yeah, I think the last one is the main one where she is staying steadfast right now. So,
I mean, it is what it is. You know, we talk about this stuff. We don't make these decisions. We don't do these investigations. And that's realistically, that's what that boils down to for me, is that we're fans of the sport. And that's nothing. That's what we are. Right? No more, no less. We are not.
My fantasy football chat is just blowing up. Well, I had to make the announcement in there because they're sleeping right now. So, so let's get back to baseball.
Let's do it. Bundles are us, baby. Yes.
Okay, so going back to Tony's thing is, so you said, so going back to Tony's proposal, you said a Rosarina, McClanahan, and a prospect for Soto. I mean, I don't hate it, but if you're going to be trading away McClanahan, you're giving away like our frontline starter right now. So who are you going to get to replace him?
Right.
It's not Luis Patino.
No.
So I mean, you're going to then have to slide Kluber back in the one spot, and then promote one of your bullpen guys. You're going to have to bring Jeffrey Springs back in from the bullpen into the starting rotation again.
Right.
And then hope Tyler Glass now comes back for, in time. I don't hate it, but I don't love it. You know what I mean?
Right. No, I'm totally with you. I'm totally with you. Wants to know how many games is Kamara going to get for beating the snot out of somebody if Watson only got 6?
You know what?
We'll jump up. It's true though. Like,
see, okay. If we want to jump into that, Kamara's suspension is going to be more, I think, because there's
physical proof.
There's physical evidence and physical proof. So his suspension will probably be in the 8 to 12, maybe a full season suspension.
Right.
With a fine. Because there is evidence. I mean, with Watson's case, it's all about he said, she said. And that's a whole different story. It's all hearsay until, there is some kind of evidence to it. I don't like going into these conversations.
It's slippery, man.
Yeah,
I'm not canceled.
Yeah, I don't. Listen, here's my thing. Kamara will probably get a bigger suspension than Watson. Most likely, like a full year.
And then we're gonna and that's gonna be the talk of the entire season.
Exactly.
And you can assault women.
And here's the thing, though, Danny. I'm very surprised that his suspension hasn't even come out yet. And it's been kind of like a really swept under the rug kind of conversation with Kamara too, because it's been all about Deshaun Watson, but everybody did kind of forget, hey, Alvin Kamara was arrested for domestic violence last year.
Right.
So
assault and battery.
Yeah. So I'm really surprised that hasn't really been more of the topic of conversation than Deshaun Watson, because on the level playing field, I mean, they're both superstars. And Kamara has been one of the top running backs in the league so far.
Right. And maybe it happens to be because Alvin Kamara is kind of like a squeaky clean kind of guy.
Right.
You never hear anything bad about him. It's always, positive conversation, positive talking points, positive headlines when it comes to Alvin Kamara. Maybe it's just let's wait and see what happens with Deshaun Watson, because this is the tip of the iceberg for us. This is the pinnacle of, oh my God moments. Oh my God. Things that we need to wait for. Some guy popped off at the mouth, got his ass beat. We'll deal with that a little later.
Well, you got to look at it this way. This will be the topic of conversation for the next week or so, and then it'll go away after this, the season really starts.
Until Alvin Kamara gets his announcement. Because if it is more than 6 games, this talking point will be around for at least 2 seasons.
I think if it's less, though, if it's less than the Watson, if it's less,
and it goes away. But if it's more than Watson,
no, I think if it's less than Watson, it's going to be more of a talking point.
You think so?
Because there's evidence there. There's evidence with the Kamara case. If you give him less than 6 games, that's going to be one of the biggest topics of conversation, because with Watson, there's nothing. It's all he said, she said. With Kamara, we have evidence there that there was domestic violence. So I think if he gets anything less than 6, that's going to be a huge talking point.
How hard is it for us to talk about this right now without?
I feel very uncomfortable and very dirty right now.
I keep fidgeting. I know you guys can see it. I'm like your dog. Like I want to
I know.
pace in the background right now. I just want to be like,
I just think what the NFL does with their punishment system when it comes to the crimes being in hand for the NFL, code of conduct is it's a little out of whack of with some of the punishments they've put down on players.
right.
Because with Calvin Ridley, honestly, really, you're gonna give him a full year for that, but you're gonna give these types of other situations when it comes to domestic abuse or child abuse or anything like that, they've been less than they haven't even been in the double digits when it comes to suspensions.
Right.
So that's why I think that the Kamara should be a huge topic of conversation. Is okay, we've got physical evidence here. If it's not more than 6 games, what are you guys really looking at when it comes to suspensions? Like what's
it's true because whether you believe in the justice system in America or not, whether you think it needs to be changed or whatever, the justice system did rule kind of in favor of Deshaun Watson, and they did not for Alvin Kamara.
Right. And listen, nothing to take away. If whatever happened with that situation happened, if it, you want to feel for the victims too, whatever happened. But if there's no kind of, if the court system's saying he's not guilty of any kind of crimes, then you kind of have to go with the justice system on this. And you got to remember,
I think
the NFL is not the justice system. The NFL is a privately owned company that can do whatever they want when it comes to suspending players.
I think that the moment the Houston Texans joined the case to testify against Deshaun Watson, I think that's really when it spun out of control and for me went, okay, I see where this is going. Not saying that these things did not happen.
Right.
But when you've got your former employer who is obviously and very clearly like a bitter ex, like for me, that's where you go, I don't see any I don't see any reason why it should have gone any further. I think if this case had any chance of holding up, the Houston Texans do not join that at all. Because as the moment they joined it, I feel like they tainted it and they tarnished it.
Oh, and also if the Texans shouldn't have settled all their, because they got sued and they settled all their lawsuits too as well.
That just that to me says that they had a hand in all of this coming forward,
right?
As well. Nonetheless,
Kamara should be the topic of conversation too. He should. Well, we really got off the rails here.
Do we want to bundle any more players together, or have we kind of eclipsed everything here?
I think we've kind of eclipsed everything there. Since we're talking about NFL, let's stick with NFL.
Let's do it. And before we even talk about the Bucs projections, because those are kind of blowing up on Twitter, let's talk about this real quick, shall we? The highest paid wide receivers in the NFL based on their average salary per year. Of course, you got Tyreek Hill at the top of the mountain at $30 million, all the way down to Deebo Samuel, who just signed his 3-year deal, which is super weird, for $76 million at $24.5 million. Is there anybody that stands out on this list that probably shouldn't be in that top 6? AJ Brown.
I think AJ Brown should be out of that list.
You think so?
Yeah. Because he had one good year so far. And then Hopkins is kind of in a conundrum right now because he's suspended. He's also been hurt. And ever since he left Houston, he really hasn't been the same.
Right.
This was a big topic of conversation too. I think it was on PTI on Friday, where do quarterbacks make the wide receiver or do wide receivers make the quarterback? Especially when it comes to the big name wide receivers like the Tyreek Hills and the Devontae Adams of the world.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But out of all this, take out AJ Brown.
Right.
I actually, let me clarify this. Keep him in there until we see what he can do in Philly.
That's fair.
You know what I mean? Because if he has a stellar year in Philly, then you can keep him in there. Because I just don't think – I think he was that flash in the pan, he had a great season, came out of nowhere in Tennessee. And obviously, you kind of saved Ryan Tannehill's career as a quarterback. I would say keep him in there for right now until we see what he can do in Philly. If he emerges as the number one, number one guy, which I know everybody's saying he is the number one guy in Philly. If he can be that number one guy and put up gaudy numbers, keep him in there. But for right now, to me, he shouldn't be in there right now.
I think for me, DeAndre Hopkins is the guy that shouldn't be in there. But I understand why he's there because he's been under contract for a while. It's not like the Arizona Cardinals are like, hey, take $27.3 million a season.
Right.
But he's the only one to me, like when I look at it and go, okay, well, yeah, he's kind of on, he's down the downward spiral of his career. Mm-hmm. He's getting older, right? Like, is he still good? Yeah, he's definitely still good, right? Tony in the chat just said, DeAndre Hopkins at this stage in his career is kind of like a myth. And he's not incorrect.
No, he's not.
And I love DeAndre Hopkins. Don't get me wrong, but he's gone for the first 6 games of the season as well.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, just looking at this list, Hopkins, I mean, you can take Hopkins out too. Brown and Hopkins.
Yeah, I think Tyreek Hill and Devontae Adams at 1-2 is okay for me. Cooper Kupp, because Cooper Kupp was consistent up until he got Matthew Stafford last year, and then he blew up, but he was already under contract anyway.
Right. Yeah, Kupp is the most consistent in there, I think, too, as well.
And he's the only one that, like, Tyreek Hill, new quarterback. Devontae Adams, new quarterback. DeAndre Hopkins missing, a third of the season. Cooper Kupp, same quarterback. AJ Brown, new quarterback. Deebo Samuel, new quarterback.
And the funny thing is, though, Danny, the top 2 are going from the toppest of the tier quarterbacks, and they're kind of downgrading themselves to the new quarterback that they have.
Right.
Tyreek's going from Patty Mahomes to Tua, and Devontae's going from Aaron to Derek Carr. Not to take anything away from Derek Carr. I think Derek Carr is a very underrated quarterback, but he's not Aaron Rodgers.
Right.
You know what I mean?
I'm with you.
I think out of all these guys, Kupp is the beneficiary of having an upgrade as a quarterback because you're going from Jared Goff to Matthew Stafford.
Right.
Kyler Murray, I'm still not sold on yet. And even Jalen Hurts. I mean, give me more. Kupp is the only guy on this list that has an upgraded quarterback. The rest of these guys have really kind of gotten a downgrade.
Right.
And Trey Lance is like a huge unknown and a question mark in San Francisco right now.
Did you see the video of Jimmy G running by himself? How depressing was that video?
It's sad almost. It's almost like the Pablo Escobar sitting on a bench all by himself meme. Right. It's kind of like that.
Jesus. We got 12 minutes left, unless we go into a little overtime here, but we got at least 12 minutes left. Let's jump into the Tampa Bay Buccaneers offensive projections that we have been popping out on Twitter. And I'm not going to post the graphic. You need to go to our Twitter. You guys need to look at it, follow, and interact. These graphics, these projections, I should say, are strictly based upon analytics and statistics. They don't account for, oh, yeah, but I think, well, they should. They don't account for any of that. And I wanted to make these as a fail-safe of you can't, you're avoiding the you don't know football trolls, right? And I love crunching numbers. Everybody that has followed anything that I've done over the last 10 years with the NFL knows that I'm a number crunching guy, and I love to do that. And that, to me, that's fun. I know some people look at it and you're like, no, it's not, but I love it. I've got Tom Brady. Of course, we have to start with Tom Brady because all of these numbers have to add up, and they do, by the way. I've got Tom Brady. If it's relevant information to you, at 442 completions this year, 4,975 yards, 44 touchdowns, and 8 interceptions.
I think that is wrong. It should be 5,000 yards.
I think, like, and like I said, if we're adding, what our personal feelings are, I'm 100% with you.
Okay.
I think he's going to be over 5,000 yards, but
all the projections that you put up, they're pretty doable.
Right.
The 8 touchdowns from Julio is, to me, maybe the only one that could not be doable, only because what kind of Julio are we getting? Are we getting healthy Julio? If we're getting healthy Julio, then it seems doable for him.
Well, you got to remember, though, is we're getting red zone Julio this year.
That's true as well.
That's the thing. That's the thing for me is we're getting red zone Julio. We're not going to get, we need a 60-yard burst from Julio. We're getting the.
Then if we're getting red zone Julio, I'm going to bump that up to 10.
Oh, I mean, so here's the thing: is Tom Brady. If we take all of the projections, right, and I'll rattle these off real quick. 74 for 1,050 and 15 scores for Mike Evans. 59, 860 and 8 scores for Julio Jones. 82 receptions, just over 1,000 yards for Chris Godwin and 7 touchdowns, and then 70 receptions for 796 and 4 scores for Russell Gage. Russell Wilson is not a wide receiver.
Hey, you never know. It could happen.
But if we take all of that, that still leaves 157 receptions, 1,268 yards, and 14 touchdowns to spread around to the remainder of the team, which all seems very, very
doable
and accurate.
Mm-hmm.
You're welcome.
Yes, I love analytics.
You know what? Like I said, for me, I'm a huge analytics guy.
Let me ask you a question, though, Danny. Looking at these projections, how plausible could this be to where all those projections that you put out could be exceeded? Give me a percentage.
All of them?
All of them.
Ooh.
What's the percentage that all of these could be exceeded instead of, not exceeded?
If I'm going to put a number behind it, I would say that all of them to be succeed would be 30%.
30%. Okay. Out of all those projections, which one of those players could exceed his projections?
Julio.
Okay.
Look, we talk about Julio Jones is often injured. He's too injured. But you got to remember, like last season, he only played in 10 games, and he averaged 15 yards per reception from Ryan Tannehill.
And you also got to factor in what they're going to be using him as. Because if they're going to be using him as a Gronk-esque type receiver, like to replace that red zone threat, like you just said before, then yeah, I can see him going in the double digits for touchdowns because he towers over corners, and Tom could just flick it up in the air and bam, he's got it. So if you're at the red zone and you've got that option where you can run him out, hell yeah. Like you're taking 8 touchdowns, you're probably going into maybe 10 to 12.
Yeah. I mean, it's I could see that as well. I honestly, I think that if I did Julio Jones on the upside,
huge upside.
Julio Jones on the upside, because the way that I based off Julio Jones numbers is I took his 4-year average, the last 2 with Atlanta and the last 3 with Atlanta and last season with Tennessee. And then I averaged them on the high upside and then on the low side.
Did you times it by 3.14 and then divide it by 12?
Yes. And then I used the Pythagorean theorem.
Okay, good.
But on the upside, Julio Jones could have 78 receptions for 1,113 yards. That's on the upside.
Okay. That's why it was such a great move, because it's such a high reward and almost like just a low risk move because of the potential that he has. You're not
$2 million cap hit. Come on, dude.
That's why when a lot of people were like, "Well, he's not Julio," well, you don't want him to. You don't expect him to be the Julio of old. You want him to be the Julio of now, where he could be so much more useful as a red zone tool. You don't need him to do, 40, 50-yard bursts to catch a high flying pass from Tom Brady. You just want him to score touchdowns.
Right.
So if you want to limit to him to be in the red zone threat or a guy you can throw a 10 to 15-yard pass to in the 20-yard, 30-yard zone, like do it. That's what I think the Bucs are going to use him as. You don't need him as a deep threat. That's why you have Mike Evans and Chris Godwin and Russell Gage.
And he doesn't have to be. I think honestly, Russell Gage immediately became, and it doesn't matter how impressive he's been so far in training camp. I think he just immediately went from 3rd to 4th.
Well, that's okay though.
Right, exactly.
And
Because
that's
you're going
okay.
to 4th for a Hall of Fame wide receiver.
I can see Gage being that really underrated breakout star of this offense because a lot of people are now putting their focus on Julio and obviously Evans and Godwin, depending on when Godwin comes back. You're gonna see, I would say, more production out of Gage. Like Gage could be, and Gage could maybe even come up to be a number 2 because of just the underratedness and not the now because before Julio Jones was signed, Gage was like that talk of the town almost. Like you're gonna see a lot of
super
about
underrated.
Yeah, super underrated. You're gonna see a lot out of this guy, and then when Julio was signed, it's like, oh, he takes a back burner. But I still think you're gonna see that production from Gage.
I mean, 70 receptions for nearly 800 yards is still some damn good for number 3 or possibly number 4.
That's pretty damn good. Especially with the unknown of if Godwin's going to be ready for week 1. You know what I mean? Because he could suffer a setback, and then you're back to square one with what we're doing with Godwin. That's why you have Gage there.
Right. Well, and then the great part about these projections, all of that's factored in, baby.
That's true.
And that's why I wanted to make sure this was as foolproof as possible. And I even posted the formula on the graphics. I wanted to say, you know what, like, here's how we got the number. I didn't reach up my own ass and be like, like I'm pulling Fantasy 5 numbers and going, 16. Like, they're legitimate. This is exactly how I view what they're doing analytically.
Right.
Because it's not, there's no opinion based in this. This is where the opinion happens, is between you and I on Channelside in the morning. This is where the opinion happens. I think Tony in the chat hit it on the head. I think this is the season that Mike Evans finally gets his first team All-Pro nod, which is, to me, is just criminal that he has not gotten that yet.
Mm-hmm.
When he's led all wide receivers in touchdowns since entering the league. But he never had Tom Brady on his team. He always had
Jameis.
He had Jameis. He had Ryan Fitzpatrick. He had Mike Glennon, Josh McCown. He had all of these quarterbacks that people don't care about and are not headline making quarterbacks unless you're doing a 30 for 30 Jameis Winston edition.
Which, if you did a 30 for 30 on Jameis Winston, would be, I think, the most interesting thing to see.
Right.
But I could digress on that.
Right. I mean, like I said, for me, I hope Mike Evans does get that first team All-Pro this season.
I'm sure he will. He better.
I would love to see him go over 14 touchdowns, by the way.
Oof. That'd be a good prop bet to have in Vegas.
It would be. I've got a good hot take for us on Friday already too.
Oh, I can't wait.
Yeah. So yeah, hop on the Twitter, jump in the chat on the comment on each one of these projections. We will be posting the Russell Gage one immediately after the show. Why? Because I post those. I can't do both at the same time. It would look weird. We are going to wrap up the show. We are going to talk about the late great Bill Russell, unfortunately at 88 years old, leaving us behind an absolute ridiculous legacy. His wife said that he passed away peacefully by her side.
I think he's also a player too. When it comes into the conversation of greatest of all time, he doesn't really get brought up. It's always usually Michael and Kobe.
Right. And here's and LeBron, of course.
Nah.
I'm but 5-time MVP, 11-time NBA champion, and 12-time NBA All-Star. Like, say what you want to say about, he played in you play when you play.
Right.
If you dominate your era, you dominated your area, period. It doesn't matter, LeBron James has been dominant in this area. I'm not a fan of LeBron James, but he has been dominant in this era. I don't know if he'd been dominant in the 60s, the 70s, the 80s. And I know what I know. And what we know is that Bill Russell was absolutely dominant.
Also, too, not only a legend on the court, but also a huge force off the court, too, with being a social activist and everything, too. I did not know he marched with Martin Luther King.
Yeah.
I did not know that.
Yep. I mean, Bill Russell he was referred to as the Babe Ruth of basketball because he was so far ahead of his time.
I think that rightfully so.
I'm a guy that averaged 22 and a half rebounds a game, 15.
I think if you have no Bill Russell, you have no social activism as you would today, because I think he paved the way for a lot of the NBA stars and players to really kind of look at the social and civil rights, things that were going on. If you have no Bill Russell, you don't have those things, because I don't think that, there would have been another player to pave the way for that. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I think that almost transcends across all sports.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah. I agree.
If there's no Bill Russell because you got to remember, like when he was doing it at a time where that was very dangerous to do as a player.
Very risky too, as well.
Right. Of like, hey, you could lose your job.
You could lose your life too, as well.
That too. I mean, we saw what happened with Dr. King. Like, I mean, it's. Could you imagine like being around in those times? Like, I couldn't imagine.
I wouldn't want to.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I feel like we might be going back to those times, but that's a conversation for an entire. That's not even for another show. That's for an off-air conversation to have. Rest in peace, Bill Russell. You will be sorely missed by the NBA world, by NBA fans, and by just sports fans in general, and by an entire community for everything that you have done. Positive both on and off the court, and it's going to be hard to replicate something that Bill Russell has done in terms of social justice activism. That's all I got on Bill Russell, man.
I think he's the best.
Anyway, that is going to wrap it up for us on this August 1st trade deadline eve edition of Channelside in the Morning from the Channelside Sports Network. I am Danny. That is Evan. And we're going to do it all over again tomorrow. We'll see you.